We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater Podcast, the podcast where we talk about...
Everything Theater. Hi, I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And we're really excited. We last week was a great guest. We have a killer great guest this week. And, I think it really speaks to the diversity and the breadth of theater, in our region, places you can reach, within a 2-hour drive, if that much. And even whether it's pro or not, Ellen, you're going to give us a little something about a local company that we all have come to know and love.
Yes, and speaking of this local company, little spoiler, we're trying to work on a big theater festival that celebrates all the region. So all the guests we've been talking to lately, hopefully they'll be involved with that too. And the head honcho of this theater company, Patrick White, Chris Foster, are in charge of Harbinger Theater. They do great work, and they've sponsored us this week. And they are doing In the Blood. It's a Pulitzer winner, Suzanne Laurie Parks play. And it runs until March 24th. So this is your last chance to check it out at the St. Rose Theater, which luckily they were able to still work in there with the St. Rose going down. So may it be the last chance to see this theater. But it tells the story of Hester, a homeless African-American woman with 5 children from 5 different fathers. She struggles to survive on the streets while providing for her children. The play shines a light on the harsh realities faced by marginalized individuals in society and raises questions about societal responsibility and compassion. So definitely one you're going to be talking about on the car ride home. Catch it. You have until the 24th.
And in terms of something old and new, I think is the way we can lead into our next guest. It's the 15th season for Wham's Theater, and there's a new producing artistic director, only the second one ever for that theater, and it's Janae Carreno. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
And
Thank
I
you.
just realized, Janae, we made sure we got Janae right.
You got it right.
Did
Janae
I get the last
Carreno.
name right?
Yeah, you got it.
This is exciting for you. You come from you're an artist and an activist.
Mhm.
So we're going to drill into that a little bit, but that so speaks to the bones of Wham's theater. Give us a little sense of how you would describe your background.
Yeah, so the way I've started describing myself since arriving to Wham is I'm an artist, an arts manager, and an activist. I was introduced to theater at a really young age through a program called New York State Theater Institute at Russell Sage. And the practices that I was exposed to were not your typical musical theater practice. I was learning psychodrama and devised theater and choreo poetry under the helm of Michael Kennedy, who was running the program at the time and now runs Creative Action Limited, and actually coincidentally is going to lead our elder ensemble at Wham in the fall. So it's a very big full circle moment for everyone. And so as I kind of started thinking about my career as a young person, I knew I wanted to work in the theater, and I knew I wanted to have an impact on women and girls' lives the way that Michael and like Brenny Campbell, who's also was a mentor of mine at New Visions, had on me. They came into my life at such an important moment. I think there's something to growing up in like a deindustrialized space that's under-resourced as a young girl specifically, and like needing to imagine other ways of being to be able to find your path. And so as I was imagining myself in my future, I knew that I was going to need to make money and I would need to be kind of financially empowered. And so I was looking for opportunities to be working in the theater where I had an exposure to female directors and experimental practices, but wouldn't have to like work for free because that was part of the culture, even just a short period of time ago. And so that's kind of my story. I started in devised theater. I worked as an arts associate at Ripe Time Inc., which is a company run by Rachel Dickstein, who's dedicated to adapting novels to stage that are focused on women's stories. I was really interested in the work of Annie B. Parsons at Big Dance Theater, and so worked as a company manager with that company, and then moved into more mission-based work when I started working at the Public Theater as a company manager. And then I worked in company management for a while, and I found it pretty difficult to navigate, like being in the theater from early morning to late night, and then having to have an artistic practice along the side was challenging, and I could feel that shift. And so I started working at Every Mother Counts, and that's actually a nonprofit that's dedicated to making pregnancy and childbirth safe, respectful, and equitable for every mother everywhere. And that was pretty pivotal. I was able to build my own body of work at my own company called Fringe and Fur, and learn so much more about how a nonprofit is run, what the fundraising is like, what what an operation, how to operate a company with a budget over $8 million. And so yeah, that's all of my job experiences have kind of been both parts: admin, artist, storyteller, and having this activist component that's deeply linked to supporting women and girls.
And we should say too that we have talked to WHAM Theater in the past, and but for the listeners who aren't familiar, it's where arts and activism meet is what WHAM stands for, and that's a huge task to step in and become the new head. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the challenges of that for you, and how you kind of put yourself in the mindset to take over?
Um, yeah, definitely. Well, as you know, Kristen Van Genhoven was one of the founders alongside Lee Strindbeck, and Kristen created an amazing foundation for me to step into. And I had been watching the company's development through my career. It was kind of rare for me to like reach out to people and invite people to my shows, but I would, anytime I was in development with a project, I'd reach out to Kristen and say, I'm doing this thing about Judy Chicago. It's just in development, like come and this is an email from my early 20s. And so when the opportunity showed up and I saw that they were posting, I was really shocked and of course hoping everything was okay. And this was an exciting moment for Kristen to be moving on to something new. But had a pretty good understanding of what the company was and what I wanted the company to become. And so I think two things really stood out to me. One, WHAM's dedicated to telling stories that benefit stories that benefit women and girls, but they're about and for everyone. And they produce at a really high level. So we have this beautiful reading series every year, and then we have this main stage production, and sometimes it's been one or two main stages. But the artists that are working are women, and they're either masters of their craft or they're in development. And I am really passionate about fostering both. How is an institution supporting women really embracing their full vision? And then how are you taking people who are emerging and allowing them the space and time to revise and attempt and be in front of an audience and get that feedback? And then we have this incredible recipient program where we have community-based partnerships who are working at the intersection of gender and racial justice, and they're helping women and girls in the community in the Berkshires nationally and internationally. And that has looked like support to domestic violence organizations or midwifery training. And so I had a really strong understanding of how I could clarify that story and how I wanted to show that ecosystem working. And so there really hasn't been a challenge yet. It's just more of this like big, beautiful opportunity for me to really exercise and put into practice things that I've collected along my journey. And I'm lucky to have the support of a founder, because I think most people would know that it's challenging sometimes to shift culture after a founder steps down. And I don't think that at all was my case. I was lucky enough that Kristen was being so planful for 2 years with the whole organization and this beautiful transition committee. And so I've really just been able to step in, and I have a season that Benita mentioned earlier. And so there is no challenge yet. I think some people are always nervous of change, but I think overall I've been really warmly embraced, and I just keep knocking on wood that will stay the case.
You know, this is an era also where DEI is coming under fire. And that is a key thread to your work. Do you find that to raise the stakes for the challenge, raise the stakes for your mission, raise the water that you have to swim through?
Yeah, so I mean, we have an amazing accountability plan at WHAM, and I feel like Kristen and the board really set the standard really for what that can look like in practice. Our board is more than 50% BIPOC representing. And so the thing that the organization is really working on is how do you make the day-to-day operations a place, how do you make WHAM a place where people of color feel welcomed and have the resources that they need, um, and are comfortable when they're, staying in our facilities when they're doing a show, and how do you make sure that the season is being curated by a diverse group of people. And so I'm of the mindset, and I think maybe this has been informed by my work at Every Mother Counts. Like, I really believe in trust-based relationship making, and I know that time is a huge factor. And so I've really, in my first few weeks, like made a really strong effort to make myself available and to show up in communities of color. And I think that will continue to foster and make real authentic relationships that aren't performative. And so, yeah, I'm just really thrilled to have more people at the table. When we think about WHAM's literary committee, for instance, who helps, we meet with the literary committee every month or so, and we read a series of plays and we get feedback. I think that can continue to grow and extend to other curatorial practices that we may have if we start presenting other work.
Talk a little bit about your season. You're
Yeah.
right out of the blocks, huh? Yeah.
Our season includes, well, we just kicked it off this weekend. It was really exciting because it was the first time we were presenting something. I was presenting a season program. So we kicked it off with Fresh Takes play reading series, and we featured Be Here Now by Deborah Zoe Lawfer. And it was directed by one of our favorites, Kelly Galvin. And it's a story about Barry, who works in a fulfillment center, like an Amazon packaging center in upstate New York. And she's kind of miscast in that employment situation. She's a philosopher, she's a professor at a university in New York. And because she hasn't been able to finish her dissertation, she can't teach. And so she's found herself back in her hometown. And she discovers that she has this brain tumor that is making her not less of a nihilist, as it turns out. And she starts to consider the value of the place that she's in, both physically, the location, like where is the value in the people and the community and the experience she's having in this small town, but also when it comes to love and it comes to how she identifies herself. And so we did the first reading yesterday at the Foundry in West Stockbridge. We had 2 amazing audiences and beautiful talkbacks. And I mean, I have to say that it's been nice, like coming home to this area. And even during auditions, we had 88 people come through, and every single artist was like so incredibly talented. Like there was not a bad audition. And so, yeah, there was just so much talent and so much love in the theater last night. Our
Just to point
next,
out, you're from Southern Saratoga County.
yeah, I'm from Mechanicville, New York. Yeah. And so our next reading is Far, Far Better Things. It's a newer work by Geetha Reddy, and it tells the story. It's inspired by Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, and it tells the story of two women, a Latina domestic worker and a young South Asian doctor. And they've been separated by class and race and kind of unspoken rules of modern womanhood. And there's like a past that links them together. Um, and so that will be happening again at the Foundry on April 7th. And then we'll do an online showing on April 13th and 14th. And then in late August or mid-August, I guess, I'm showing a piece of my own work called Outside. And this is like a story about almost like a female hero's journey. A character named June Ashbury returns to a place called Paradise after being gone for a long time, and she's reconciling with the ghosts of that place. And there's been a climate disaster that's kind of changed everything for her and her family. And so that's been really fun because it's a devised theater piece. It's something I worked on in residency in Queens, New York, and last summer, and it involves puppetry and a brand new original composition by Masatora Goya. And this will be a site-specific version so that the audience in the Berkshires can kind of get to know me and my work and my aesthetic, and it'll be at the Mount. And so that's almost it. We also have in October, Galileo's Daughter. And this is a story about a writer who flees to Florence and to read the letters between Maria Celeste and Galileo. And the letters are being written in a time where the daughter of Galileo is in a convent because her father is being persecuted for his radical ideas and he's being censored. So it feels like a very timely piece. It has this magic of, Florence, but also kind of this astrology aspect of the play, and the universe is very present. But it also feels really connected to it being an election year in a sense, where we're all kind of thinking about our place in the universe of things and where we stand on free thought. So that feels very palpable and important right now.
So theater has the amazing impact, right, to elicit change, to make connections, and Wham certainly chooses material that sparks conversations, reaches all sorts of audiences. What would you say, you mentioned before that you make sure you make an effort to, be available and to be there to, reach out to all communities and diversities and so forth. What are some ways that other artistic directors and heads of, other theaters can think about making that connection with the people that their theater should reach?
Yeah. I mean, I think something Wham does really well is, and I've become even more mindful of since getting here, is asking the community, what are the things at the top of your mind? What are the things that you're experiencing? A big part of clarifying our recipient program in the months to come will really be like pulling our audience and pulling, even if they're not people who are currently coming to the theater, asking our community partners to answer a survey. What are the issues that are facing women and girls in Pittsfield or in Berkshire County? And the issues are different in every county in Massachusetts also. So it's being like, how local are you being, and how much is the theater a part of like a larger statewide ecosystem? What is the legislation of that state? And then how does that fit into like a more national conversation? So I would say, getting permission and consent for projects that you're doing when you're using, individual donors and peer donors funds is like a huge conversation that always has to be in motion. What else should other artistic directors be doing? That's an important one. I think also showing up at the organization and breaking bread, or in community spaces where there's already culture present, and finding a way to make relationships there and not assuming anything about anyone, being curious is big. I mean, I know there's so much work to be done in the theater in terms of DEIA, but I also know that we are typically people who really do care how we impact others. And so I do find a lot of hope in the process that I'm seeing other organizations.
What do you want to launch? You take over and it's a going concern with a direction. Let's look down 2, 3 years from now.
Yeah.
What's your vision for what you'll be able to point to and say, yes, this was my vision and it's come to fruition?
One thing I've been thinking about is I'd love to work with a diverse curatorial team to present a festival of work by women and girls. And I'd like that to be understood that it's their work in progress and that the audience is a huge component to the development of that work. And that was hugely important in my career as a director and having the support of the Brick Theater in Brooklyn. And they fostered a piece of my work through 3 iterations. And then by the time the new artistic director became the new artistic director, they launched the season with my piece fully designed. And I'm so glad I had that time. But when you're working on so many different modalities, when you don't have a script when you come into the room, and when you're working with a composer and you're interested in movement, time is everything. And I also think there's something to pushing up against the expectation for a perfect, masterful work in like 3 to 6 weeks, that I like to undo that expectation. So I think if I can get our audience, and I don't think it will be that hard, but I know it'll be new, to embrace work in progress, knowing that in the end, we can also, sometimes invite these women and girls back to show work in the biggest vision that they could have, and that WHAM can be a part of that. That would be huge for me. I just think that I see so many directors that are male identifying that get their work on huge stages, and they're these incredibly visual pieces that are firing in all different modalities of the way that we can put and conceive of a piece of theater, that craft. And I want to see that same level of support put into women so that I see them, in Europe, or I see them in the city, or I see them, like making a company like Double Edge, where they're doing adventurous, bold, physical, rigorous work. And so, so the small part of that is this small festival that I imagine, maybe first starting off with like 2 or 3 curated pieces and then growing it. The other thing I'd really like to see is bringing theater into community, and maybe working in partnership with other local theaters to make that happen. I know for me, growing up in Mechanicville, there's really no bus going in or out, and unless you were going to the state to go to work. And if you don't have money for gas, you might not be able to get to where you need to go. And so we really do kind of underestimate how far people travel in the United States for resources, but specifically in rural areas. And I'd
I
like
have
to,
to ask, I'm going to jump in, because at Park Playhouse, there's
Mhm.
a school program where they
Yeah,
take, shows into the school
yep,
specifically, as you know, because Cohoes, maybe you may not be able to get out, and
yep.
see this, and others. I'm wondering if part of your vision would be to take your work, not yours specifically, but the work of Wham, and bring that into schools
Mhm.
where they can't get to you, but you can get to them.
Yeah, I think, we've started that. We have a teen ensemble that we're currently looking for applicants for, and it's a paid opportunity too. So that's some of the thinking I feel, um, it's a gesture. It's a big gesture because it's changing culture. But teens can sign up and we pay them for their performance time, and they build site-specific devised theater pieces, and then they'll show it in the spring. And so we have these amazing workshops, but I think I'm thinking of like the mobile unit at the public theater, which I worked on, and bringing that to community centers, bringing that to a park, bringing that to a school, bringing that to the Elks Club, where people are already gathering is hugely impactful. It's sad to me that the arts are so underfunded still. And yet they're the thing that really lifted me out of like a really challenging time. And if I don't know I don't know how my mom found New York State Theater Institute, but I feel like my mission now is for all young girls to be able to have that experience, that reflection space. And, we also underestimate how impactful youth is, that period of time can be to how you grow as a whole woman, as a whole person, and how you show up for things. And so I feel like the arts really, builds that reflection, that having that witness to your story is so crucial. And then having someone believe that you can do something, and gives you the tools
But
is,
we're going to agree with you here.
yeah.
We pour that Kool-Aid. And we've talked about this on the program is, look, there's tremendous value in sports. Don't get me wrong. Having been in both worlds in high school, but we still put our emphasis on the physical only. We'll come up with money for traveling soccer and things of that sort. And way down is money for the arts and getting the arts into schools, when in fact that may be, again, I'm not just in sports, but the arts may be the spark that keeps your generator humming through life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so true. And I have had this now that I've returned in a sense. I have had like these moments where I'm reflecting back on my childhood. I'm like, what has made me who I am today? And I could say it was like the hardship, but I do remember like going to the museum with my grandparents, like the Albany Museum, going to Steamer 10, going to the library in Albany, like having access to First Night, like these public events, where there was some magic happening, where it like lifts you out of the kind of ordinary. And it's like, where did those stories come from? Oh, I want to read, this person is expressing themselves in this way and I identify with that. I want to be more like them. I'm going to pursue that career. And for me, really, as someone who's running a company, that has educational programs, it's not that I'm trying to make every kid a theater kid. It's that I want every person have the tools to believe that they can start something, be in community with people, agree and disagree, and move it forward to get this kind of like objective thing at the end that we're all trying to imagine together. And that is going to be useful anywhere kids go. So yeah.
Doesn't that just make like a harmonic in one's heart? I'm also the timekeeper on this stuff. And we hit this time where Ellen she gets to run now completely.
So we always designate the last little part of our podcast to just be a quick rapid fire interview with you, Janae, just to kind of get to know you a little bit better. So we call it the close up. So Janae, are you ready for your close up?
Yes, Mr. DeMille.
So when was the moment where you just knew, like, I have to be involved with theater?
Yeah, Michael Kennedy made me read The Journey by Mary Oliver, and had done a psychodrama exercise before where she said, you were, where I shared that I was an adult when I grew up. And I read the poem, the first version, like an oratory actor performing. And then she said, well, this personal thing that you mentioned. And I read it again and I was like, oh my God, yes, someone gets it. So I was like, yeah, I want to always be connected to this part of myself.
Is there a certain play or experience that just has had a very profound impact on your life as you've developed as an artist?
Yeah, I directed my senior year of undergrad. I directed The Skriker by Carol Churchill, which is a play about an ancient fairy shapeshifter who meets these two young girls, and one has lost her baby and one is pregnant. And it really does play with all these myths about what a good mother is and what a good mother isn't, and the stigma around being a young mom. And that was something I really connected to because my parents were very young when they had me. And the best part of it, though, was the way that we made the piece come to life as an ensemble. And there were 15, I think it was like 13 to 15 women from all different backgrounds. And we met every single week, 2 to 3 times a week for like, I don't know, 15 months. And we mounted this thing and the theater was packed because we found this really clever way. It took place in a hospital, the shape-shifting curtains. And so we would go to class with these wristbands, hospital wristbands, and someone would say, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And we'd say, "Oh, come to our show." And we'd give everyone a wristband. So it was just really magical. And it was one of those times where I said, this is the process I want to have. This is the director I am. This is the vision and the visual, the costumes, the music, everything is orchestrated. And I wanted to do more of that.
And your marketing skills were pretty good.
They were pretty good. Yeah, very immersive.
That's clever. Are there any projects out there that you want to tackle someday?
I've been thinking of, this is unusual for me because it would be scripted, but I would like to do a translation of Mother Courage by Bertolt Brecht.
Hmm.
And I'd like it to be, I'm still deciding if it's like in Polish. Is it the play? It's actually about the 30-year war. So it's been like placed in World War II a lot, but I kind of want to go back to this conversation about power, territory, and have it performed by all women.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking about doing some kind of like Polish or Russian translation of this play.
We'll buy
Anything?
tickets.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to impart to our female listeners, to female identifying people who would like to pursue theater and sometimes feel like maybe the door's not open in certain places?
I think you just can't underestimate any of the experiences you've had or any time you put up a piece of work and like not say, I would defer from saying, "Oh, it was just a play in the garage. It was just in the cafe." Our counterparts aren't doing that. And so I think every time we get a chance to practice, it's powerful. And every time we get a chance to gather, it's powerful. And I would just say keep going, because theater, the most inspirational thing to me about theater is it's like the long game. Like female directors become successful in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and then they're like, mythical at that point. And so just keep going.
That's
Love it.
perfect. Yeah, I was saying that's a good way to wrap up today.
Janae, thank you so much. What a treat to
Thank
talk
you.
with you. To expand, really help us better see the no limits of theater.
Mhm.
A company is not defined by 2 or 4 or 6 or 10 shows, but ultimately we need to look differently at every company and look at the heart and
Mhm.
see what the mission is. And
Mhm.
then we begin to understand. So thank you. Thanks for the
Yeah.
reminder.
Thank you so much.
And for our listeners, just a reminder to go catch In the Blood at Harbinger Theater. You have until the 24th. It's at St. Rose Theater. Sounds like a very impactful story that will be one that you'll be talking about. So please catch that to support that wonderful company. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. We'll see you next time. Be well. Buy a ticket.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.